I was raised to be a good Muslim, to follow the rules my family set for me. I knew what was expected: modesty, respect, and loyalty. The teachings of my faith were clear, and I believed in them with all my heart. I thought I understood what love was supposed to be until Jack entered my life. He wasn't like the other men I knew. Jack was different. Older, a police officer, someone my father trusted. I always saw him as a protector, someone who looked out for my family, someone I respected, someone I could trust. But sometimes, respect isn't enough. What happens when your heart begins to betray everything you've been taught? What happens when someone you trust, someone who's always been there, starts to make you feel something you know you're not supposed to? I never expected it. I never asked for it. But the more I saw Jack, the more everything started to change. And it terrified me. I was raised to follow the rules. I was taught what love is supposed to be, but love doesn't always follow the rules. And sometimes, it's not as simple as it seems. I never thought much about Jack, the policeman. He was just someone I'd seen around, someone who worked for my father's community. He was always polite, always professional, but I never thought he'd be someone I'd pay much attention to. To me, he was just another older man doing his job. Nothing more, nothing less. But one afternoon, when I ran into him outside the local store, something changed. It started with a simple question about my studies. Nothing special, really. But the way he asked it, it wasn't just casual small talk like most people would. His voice had a depth to it, a real interest. It wasn't the usual "how's school," or "what have you been up to?" It felt like he actually cared about the answer. And when I replied, I saw the way his eyes lingered on me, as if he was actually taking the time to listen to every word I said. I wasn't used to that. No one had ever looked at me like that before. Most of the time, people would ask just to be polite, but with Jack, it was different. He didn't just listen, he heard me. He was paying attention in a way that made me feel seen in a way I hadn't felt in a long time. It was like for that moment, I mattered more than anything else in the world. From that day on, I started to notice him more. It wasn't just the casual greetings or the polite waves. It was the way he'd stop to ask how I was doing, the way his eyes would soften when he spoke to me, like I wasn't just another teenager in the neighborhood. He made me feel like my thoughts and opinions had weight, that I mattered. Each conversation, though small, felt like it carried some deeper meaning that I didn't fully understand. But I wanted to. I started looking forward to seeing him. The awkward moments, when we'd run into each other unexpectedly, felt almost comforting. I started to catch myself wondering when I might see him next, and I didn't know why. Wasn't he just a friend of the family? An older man who'd seen a lot of life, someone I should just respect and leave it at that? But the more we spoke, the more his presence began to affect me. And every time we talked, I felt this pull, this warmth that grew stronger each time. But the guilt came soon after. What was I doing? Why was I starting to feel this way? He was older, so much older. He was someone I should have seen as a father figure, a protector, not someone who made my heart beat a little faster whenever he smiled at me. This wasn't how I was raised. I knew it wasn't right, that I shouldn't feel drawn to him the way I did. My faith, my family, all the values I held dear, they were supposed to guide me. They told me this kind of feeling was wrong. But no matter how hard I tried to convince myself that I was overthinking it, that it meant nothing, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more. Every time we spoke, I felt my resolve slip just a little bit more. It wasn't just admiration anymore. It was something deeper, something I couldn't ignore. Something that terrified me, because if I let it continue, I would be crossing a line that I wasn't sure I could come back from. And yet, I couldn't stop it. I couldn't stop thinking about him, couldn't stop wanting to be around him. And with each passing day, the pull only grew stronger. The more I tried to fight it, the harder it became to push away the truth of what I was feeling. And that's when I knew I wasn't just dealing with admiration. Something deeper, something more complicated, was starting to take hold of me. And I didn't know how to stop it. I started looking forward to our conversations. Every time I saw Jack, it felt like I was being pulled into something I couldn't control. It wasn't just the way he asked about my day or my studies, it was the way he truly listened. It was the way he cared, as if my thoughts, my feelings, they mattered to him more than just being polite. When I was around him, I felt heard, like no one else in the world mattered except for the two of us. It was confusing, though, because I knew this wasn't just concern for my well-being. It was more. It was something deeper, something I wasn't prepared for. I had been taught to guard my heart, to protect myself from feelings like these. My faith told me to stay strong, to avoid temptation, to never let anything pull me away from what I knew was right. But Jack, he made it impossible to ignore the way my heart would race when he smiled at me, when he looked at me like I was the only person in the room. It was like he saw me, truly saw me, in a way no one else ever had. And it felt good. It felt safe. But it also felt wrong. Every time we spoke, the weight of what I was feeling grew heavier. I knew this wasn't right. I was taught that relationships like this were forbidden, that I should never allow myself to even think of a man like Jack in this way. But the more I tried to push the feelings down, the stronger they became. Every time he looked at me, every time he asked me about something personal, my heart would race, and my mind would tell me it was wrong. I was betraying everything I had been taught, everything I had promised myself to uphold. But when I was with him, it didn't feel wrong. It felt like something I couldn't fight anymore. I knew I couldn't keep living like this, torn between my heart and my faith. But every time I saw him, it became harder to pretend like it was nothing. The pull I felt towards him was undeniable, and it was starting to take over my thoughts. I had always been taught what was right, what was expected of me. But now, every glance, every moment spent with Jack, was starting to unravel everything I believed in. And I wasn't sure how much longer I could hold on to what I knew was right. One night, Jack pulled me aside, away from the crowd. His usual calm demeanor was gone, replaced with an intensity that I couldn't quite understand. His eyes held something I couldn't ignore. He told me I was special, that he saw something in me that no one else did. The words were simple, but the way he said them, it felt like he was seeing me in a way no one ever had before. And it hit me, all at once, in a way I couldn't deny anymore. I couldn't keep pretending. My heart was racing, my thoughts scattered, but deep down, I knew this was a moment I couldn't ignore. Everything inside me screamed that this was it, the point where I had to make a choice. For so long, I had told myself it was just admiration, just respect, that I was imagining things. But here, in his presence, the truth was undeniable. What I felt for him wasn't just fleeting, it was real. But as those words hung in the air, something inside me twisted. My mind screamed at me, reminding me of everything I had been taught. Relationships like this weren't just forbidden, they were wrong. Everything I believed in, everything I had worked so hard to uphold, was now at risk. But in that moment, I didn't care. I was no longer thinking about right or wrong. I was thinking about the way my heart ached when he looked at me, the way his touch made me feel alive in ways I had never experienced. I could feel myself breaking. I could feel the weight of my faith pulling me back, telling me to turn away, but everything in me wanted to stay. I wanted to be close to him. I wanted to know what it felt like to be the one he saw as more than just a girl, more than just someone to protect. And then, without thinking, I stepped forward. My hands trembling, I let him in, the space between us closing. I knew the consequences, but it didn't matter anymore. I felt his breath against my skin, and without another word, he leaned in. And just like that, the world around me faded. His lips met mine. In that instant, every fear, every doubt, every lesson I had been taught, it all vanished. I knew I had crossed a line I could never uncross. But it felt too right, too intense, too real to turn away from now. I was no longer just Layla, the good Muslim girl. I was someone else now, someone I didn't recognize, but someone I couldn't stop. The days after the kiss felt like a blur. It was as if the world around me had shifted, and I couldn't find my place anymore. I couldn't look my family in the eye. I had crossed a line I couldn't undo. The weight of what I'd done settled heavily on my chest, suffocating me. Jack and I had shared something that felt real, something intense, something I had never experienced before. But at what cost? I wasn't just breaking my heart, I was breaking my faith. Everything I had been taught, everything my family and my community had instilled in me, seemed so distant now. My faith had always been my guide, my anchor, but now it felt like I had betrayed it. I thought about the teachings of Islam, the values I was supposed to uphold, and all I could feel was guilt. The sacred bond between my family and me had been shaken, and the fear that I had lost myself forever consumed me. I couldn't help but think about how my parents would react if they knew. The thought of their disappointment, the shame of letting them down, tore at me. And my community? How would they see me now? I had always been the girl who followed the rules, the one who held on to her faith no matter what. But now, I had become someone I didn't recognize. Someone who had allowed emotions to cloud her judgment, someone who had ignored the lines that were never meant to be crossed. Could I ever find redemption? Was there even a way back from this? I had let my feelings for Jack drown out the voice of reason, and now I was paying the price. My heart told me it was love, but deep inside, I knew I had betrayed everything I believed in. I couldn't shake the question, was I lost forever in this forbidden love, or could I find a way to make things right? I wanted to believe I could fix it, that somehow I could undo what I had done, but with each passing day, the realization set in that this was no longer something I could walk away from. What had started as an innocent connection had now become a tangled mess of emotions and guilt that I didn't know how to unravel. Would I ever be able to reconcile these feelings, or had I destroyed everything that truly mattered to me? I don't have all the answers. I don't know if I'll ever be able to reconcile my heart with my faith. The conflict still lingers, each day a struggle between what I know is right and what my heart insists is real. But as I sit here, reflecting on everything that's happened, I've come to accept one undeniable truth: what I felt for Jack was real. The connection, the emotions, everything that pulled me toward him, it wasn't some passing fantasy. It wasn't something I could easily dismiss. It was something I never expected, something that came at a cost I couldn't have foreseen. And maybe that's the hardest truth of all, to love someone and know it's forbidden, to feel something so deep and yet know it can never truly be embraced. But in that truth, I've found something else: growth. I may not have full redemption, and I may never fully reconcile the pieces of my heart and soul that have been torn between my desires and my faith, but I've learned something about myself. I've learned that emotions are powerful, and they can shape us in ways we never expected. And sometimes, those feelings, no matter how complicated, teach us lessons we might not understand right away. I know I can't change the past. I can't undo what happened, and I can't erase the choices I've made. But I can learn from them. I can grow stronger in my understanding of who I am and what I believe. The weight of my decision will always be with me, but I'm no longer running from it. I've come to accept that this part of my journey, as painful as it's been, has made me who I am today. Maybe one day, I'll find a way to heal. Maybe I'll find a way to reconcile my heart with my faith. But for now, I've accepted that this chapter is one I can't rewrite. I've loved, I've hurt, and I've learned, and that's something I'll carry with me, no matter where life takes me next. I don't know what the future holds. Maybe I'll find peace, maybe I won't. But what I've learned is that love isn't always simple, and sometimes, it comes at a cost we never imagined. There's no easy way to explain the turmoil, the choices, the heartbreak I've experienced. It's not a story with a clear ending, not one where everything is neatly tied up in the way we hope life will be. But that's the reality of my journey, unpredictable, complicated, and raw. I've realized that sometimes the most powerful lessons aren't the ones we expect. I couldn't control my feelings for Jack, and I couldn't erase them after they had taken root in my heart. But I've learned that it's okay to not have all the answers. It's okay to be conflicted, to be unsure. It's part of being human, part of growing up. The weight of what I've done may always linger, but I know that this chapter of my life, though painful, has shaped me into someone new. I'll carry the lessons from it, the love, the loss, and the guilt, as a part of who I am. And maybe that's the only closure I can find. So, this is the end of my story for now. I don't know what comes next, but I'm learning to accept it, one day at a time. If you've connected with my story, if you've felt the emotions, the struggles, and the choices that came with it, I encourage you to reflect on your own journey. Life isn't always easy, and sometimes the hardest lessons are the ones we never see coming. If you're moved by what you've heard, make sure to like this video and share it with someone who might need to hear it. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories that explore the complexities of love, faith, and the human heart. Thank you for joining me on this emotional journey. I appreciate you being here, and I hope you'll come back for more.